Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who is almost currently totally engulfed inside of a paranormal demon's snake-like form in his nightmare. It's John Levingood.
Oh my god, I feel like an egg on one of those Nature Channel shows where the snake gets to the bird's nests.
Yeah, and you're like you wrote the post for Movies, Films, and Flicks about the woman almost getting engulfed by...
I know, I feel like a 9-year-old girl in The Taking of Deborah Logan.
So I gotta say, first and foremost, thank you for going through with this episode despite battling a giant paranormal demon. I mean, this shows your dedication to the Movies, Films, and Flicks podcast.
I still have the scraping tooth marks on my abdomen. He's actually still at my ankles. We're still fighting.
You're just kicking him
It's like
off?
when you watch... You know the old nature shows when they show the alligator and the anaconda, and then they cut and they're like, this is 30 minutes later. And they're still wearing each other out like a WrestleMania of just two people who can barely stand and throw their fake punches anymore. So the Freddy snake is still at my ankles right now. He's half passed out, but whenever I try and pull my legs away, he chomps back down on my ankles. And then I kick him in his uvula, and then he kind of loosens his grip a little bit. But we're just kind of trapped in this stalemate right now.
You guys are becoming friends.
I wish that I didn't change my socks after the gym, because then I would have been free by now.
I was going to say, have you ever had a pair of high socks on and you lazily try to take them off? Like one pair of socks and you try to take, you have your no sock on your left foot, a sock still on your right foot, a big one, and you try to take it off with your foot. It gets ugly.
You have to hook it with your big toe.
Yeah,
if you don't hook it at your calf with your big toe, all is lost and it's going to go horribly wrong.
And if you're not into it, it's going to go bad. So is it one of those type things?
You need to commit to a good grip. Well, the problem is that he already committed to a good grip, and my A game wasn't on. I'm like, I'm too big for him to swallow. But I forgot my nature shows. It's like, oh, right, he's going to unhinge. He somehow got my plus-sized ass in his mouth.
I mean, Debbie Logan, man. Think Debbie Logan.
Debbie Logan, she had some serious unhinging. She had a lower jaw like the Predator screaming in a thrash metal band.
Wow.
How's that for a visual?
I love that. And I gotta say, John, Debbie Logan started getting popular on streaming platforms, I believe Shudder and Netflix. But years before that happened, you were all over it.
Right, well, I'm not going to take any credit. I think that people just discovered an unexpectedly good movie.
I think, but we're not doing like hipsters. Yeah, I was there first. Right. But you were all over Debbie Logan.
I mean, I might have given it that 1% nudge. Yeah, I hope some listenership get to. One day that should probably be something that we pod about a year or two from now. It came out in 2014. Once it's been out for 7, 8, 9 years, and we have a new crop of listeners who have never even heard of this movie, that's when we got to tackle Debbie Logan, the snake-eating, demon-possessed woman.
I like it.
I mean, that's right. The egg-swallowing, snake demon-possessed woman.
Jeez Louise. And just don't wear socks. Oh, wear socks.
I'm gonna go for a small hike in Turkey Oak Scrub here in Florida. Get lots of sand spurs on my socks and leave them on for when she comes. Yeah, sand spurs.
If I was in the crowd watching that fight between you and Worm Snake Freddy, I know that Freddy is a horrible murderer who keeps child souls in his belly and becomes stronger. But if you sandspurred him, I'd be like, that's cheating.
That's cheating? With all the shenanigans he pulls?
Listen, when you're from Florida, you get one sandspur, and somehow out of nowhere you get 40. I don't know how it happens. And then you're taking them off, they get stuck on you. It's a nightmare.
Do you think that Freddy, would never invade the dreams of people in Florida because of the unexpected Florida problems? Oh, what's with all these gators? He'd be all mad.
Bugs.
These mosquitoes are deadly. That's not a good Freddy voice. But just all the things that, and then he'd bump into a Florida man, and he'd be like, "Whose nightmare is this?"
Bath salts.
Right, exactly. Like some dude under a bridge.
And then one night, if you've seen the movie Spring Breakers, he's hanging out with Alien, just driving around looking depressed. Alien's just like, St. Pete. That's where we're from, so we can say this. And Freddy's just looking really depressed. We both went to school. I just want to preface this. I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Hudson, Florida. I met John in St. Petersburg. John went to UF. He got all of his, you got your, bachelor's and master's there. I went to Florida State. My brother went to UF. I have family that so we're from Florida, so we can make fun of it, right?
Right, yeah. It's not like we're two dudes from Michigan saying Florida sucks. We love Florida.
Yeah. I mean, you currently live in Florida. You love Florida.
I live just outside of Tampa.
That's right. Now, I gotta tell you something about this movie, John. I had watched this back in the day, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warrior. It had been so long that I was confusing it with 4. I kind of had forgotten about it. I mixed up some of the kills that were in some of the films, but watching it again as much older, we're probably talking 17 years. This movie hits a lot harder now that I'm older, and I appreciate it a lot more. And when I was sometimes I write articles about, I wrote an article for Rotten Tomatoes about the best horror sequels. And in that, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 kept coming up. I mean, this movie is 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's 6.6 on IMDb. It's the third highest on Rotten Tomatoes behind Nightmare on Elm Street, A New Nightmare. And it's number 2 on IMDb, just behind the first, the classic. So this one's considered the top 2-3 of the franchise. And it hits pretty hard, knowing how cruel Freddy is in this. And how these kids, none of these kids are bad kids. They're in these institutions because of Freddy or past addictions. These are troubled kids who aren't that bad, and they are killed horribly by a horrible man. And I know that this is when a lot of the one-liners of Freddy started kicking off, but even his one-liners in this movie are mean. They're not cute. They're mean.
They're mean, but they're not. And I know he uses the word bitch a lot, and that gets Freddy a deserved bad rap, especially today, right? When he uses it, I don't know, in this particular Nightmare on Elm Street movie, it feels the least gratuitous. It feels the most grounded in what I will call the natural, credible, inherent meanness of the character. Whereas in the sequels, in either direction, earlier or later, he seems to just throw it in because it seems, let's write that because it's some sassy, evil thing that Freddy would say.
You're eating some granola, bitch.
Right. Right. It would just be thrown in, or it would feel more like deliberate misogyny than deliberate hatefulness. And in this, Freddy's hating his fare, even though he loves hunting his fare. So I was writing something up about this, and there's actually, I wrote a little blip that actually really touches on this before we get into specific discussions of Freddy. Would you afford me probably 60 seconds, Mark?
John, how many rants have you afforded me?
Well, but we go on a lot of rants just on the fly. I'm politely asking for this one. Teacup risen and pinky up.
That's totally fine, bitch.
All right. So, I mean, we were already touching on this, but like, what so distinctly separates Dream Warriors from its predecessors is how, I'll use the term socially brutal it is. Like, trigger warnings abound as Freddy is assaulting our moral sensibilities regarding rape, mental illness, drug addiction, bullying the handicapped with their handicap, general misogyny, sexuality, and suicide. But unlike most horror, including the other Noe's films, this brutal, unapologetic meanness feels oddly appropriately grounded in its execution. It doesn't feel like it's taking its own content lightly. That actually comes from a conversation Mark and I were having earlier this week. It doesn't play it as much for gags as we would see in the franchise installments both earlier and later in the franchise. But rather, when Freddy kills a victim using her own addiction against her, he seems to become pleasurably high. And that could seem like the crass, insensitive, mean for the sake of mean thing to write if you're writing a movie like this. But in fact, he doesn't seem to make gag of it. He is literally getting high in his fantasy while corrupting hers. And that's what gives him his power. It's almost like when we see the steam taken from the greatest suffering of children in Dr. Sleep. It doesn't mock. This boogeyman simply exploits the weaknesses he finds ferreting out your darkest dreams, and that is where he finds his greatest power.
Wow. No, I 100% agree with you. And the scene
and
where...
most of that's from us. Half of that's just from us, rapping about this.
And I do want us to know when we were talking about this, there was a lot more ums and ahs. And you know what I mean? And is that right? And is that good? Does that make sense? But I do... John, maybe you can help me find a way to make this more eloquent. I'm a big fan of Korean horror/thrillers, such as I Saw the Devil, or Oh man, I just had another one in my head that I just totally forgot. I mean,
Tale of Two Sisters.
Yeah, Tale of Old Boy. Let's see. Man, I can't believe I forgot one. I'll come back with it later. But some of these films, they just go to such dark and mean places. But they go there. They're not doing this for laughs. They're not making the violence pretty. They're not making the violence. They are just taking you through hell. Oh, Thirst, the vampire film. They're just taking you through.
Yes.
They're taking you through journeys to really hurt you. And they're executed really well. The violence is not easy. It is bloody, it's quick, and for some reason with those films, and maybe I don't know if this is weird or not, but then I'll watch other movies that just glorify death, or they treat it as something that's very blasé. I was watching a show on a network show about spies on one of the TV. It's been canceled, but there's a scene where this guy had this relationship with this woman, and it turns out that she's a double agent. Our hero of this movie walks up, shoots her right in the heart, and then makes a joke and walks away, and that offended me.
It's crass.
Yeah,
it's crass.
I just thought to myself, okay, this is network television. Millions of people are watching this, and a man just murdered a woman that double-crossed him, whatever, and he laughed about it. And it treats death like it's not important. With some of these films, like, you watch these movies, and then with this one, I mean, these are kids who rally around each other and attempt to put their lives on the line to stop this creature. And what they get in return are just brutal deaths. And I guess the scene with Taryn, and I was looking through some lists because I was curious, John, about the best kills in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And every list has 3 or 4 of the kills from this movie. So
3 or 4?
Yeah, of the top 10 of the whole Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And also, the best characters, there's always 3 or 4 from this film in the top 10.
Yeah, they're hands down the best in this one, I'd say, other than part 1 just with Nancy.
And like the brutal part with Taryn, and you've seen this movie if you guys have watched this, but she finally gets her confidence back. She's dressed up as this knife fighter in an alley. Have a nice knife fight in an alley, which I enjoy. And she actually stabs Freddy, and she gets the upper hand, and she feels confident. So when he uses his needles as fingers, that's just a cruel, cruel fate. Like, she thought that she was finally sticking up for herself, when in turn, Freddy had her the whole time. And that's dark. And if they would have played it with him chasing around with fingers, gonna get you high, gonna get you high. You know, like Freddy going, oh, I'm gonna get you, like, oh, like, here's some coke. Like, that would have been really insulting. But the way he treated it and the helplessness of it and her death after she got break, like, that, maybe I'm looking too much into it, but that's something that hits. And I think that's a reason why it's considered to be one of the best horror sequels today. Because it doesn't treat death lightly, there's likable characters, and the villain is reliably mean.
Well,
and I like that.
I think that you took a good path with this, starting with the Korean films and relating to what I'll call the cheapness of this scene you recollected from a TV show, right, on network television. Because on network television, yeah, they might have just been writing crassly, here's the cheap, easy way to get to this, and I want to show he's so evil by making him joke about it, and it's very simple. We're not going to give his backstory. We're not going to show why the Joker became the Joker and why he's so twisted. But sometimes to explore that is too much, and you have to fully explain it in order to explain it. You can't give pieces for people to swallow that pill and accept that story. I'm not defending that show for this reason. That might have just been cheap writing. But it's hard to fully go on this journey. It's hard to explore, like in this movie, it's hard to explore notions of the rape of Freddy's mother and how that could have affected his upbringing. Was Freddy already critically disturbed and mentally ill because his mother was inseminated by an incredibly disturbed person? And was he almost inherently, I don't know, air quotes, evil or just disturbed and needed help because of that? Or is it something where the nurture was never there? And I'm going to start a thought process. I don't want to finish because I'm going to do what I think television shows